record. Okay, great. And now we're recording. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the South Jersey STEM Career Panel. My name is Maya Bhutani. I'm the president and founder of South Jersey STEM, and I'm going to be moderating this panel today. We have 4 wonderful women who are going to be telling us about their careers in STEM, along with some advice and some guidance for the rest of us who are interested in following STEM careers. So I introduced myself, and now I'll hand it over to the panel to have the chance to introduce themselves. Allie, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Allie Mitchell. I'm a professor in the Division of Pediatric Cardiothoracic Surgery in the Department of Surgery and Biomedical Engineering at the Medical College of Wisconsin and Children's Research Institute. I study genetic models of a birth defect called congenital heart disease.
And I'll go next. I am Melonie Teichert. I am also a professor. I'm a physical chemistry professor at the United States Naval Academy. I teach both freshman chemistry, so all levels of freshman chemistry, as well as advanced chemistry and quantum mechanics and thermodynamics. Probably something interesting about my background is I did spend several years in the military. So I worked at the Air Force Research Lab, working on the development of high energy materials. So that is in my past background as well.
Wow, some amazing women. So I'm Neha Vagadia. I'm actually a pulmonary critical care physician here locally at one of our health centers, Virtua Health Center in New Jersey. So far, I've been doing, a lot of pulmonary critical care, and in the setting of COVID, have seen a lot of COVID for that reason.
Hi, and I'm Gloria Kolb. I am the CEO and co-founder of Elidah, but my background is biomedical engineering. So I've designed everything from hip implants to urology stents, and now we have a device for women with incontinence.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So we have quite a diversity of different STEM interests and backgrounds being presented here. So it'll be really nice to hear about all these different careers. Okay, awesome. So with that, we'll kind of go into the first question, which is, how did you choose your career path?
So I took opportunities that were interesting and meaningful to me. STEM opened an enormous opportunity of choices and gave me the tools, I think, to help make well-informed decisions. I was also influenced practically by life, balancing marriage with a husband who's a busy pediatric cardiac surgeon and having a family. I have 3 children, a son who's 19 and 2 daughters who are 16 and 14, and 2 dogs.
Yeah, this was an interesting question for me because I never really had a plan per se when I started out. I really just followed my interests and strengths, and I love a good challenge. So even when I started undergrad, I knew I was going to do STEM, but I didn't really have this vision of me as a professor someday. I think at every point I just approached life with, this is interesting, I'm going to do this. That's what led me into the military for some time. I also am a mother. I have 3 kids, 2 daughters that are 18 and 16 and a son that is 13. So pretty close to Allie's kids' ages. But some advice I guess I would give along that is, it's okay if you don't have a path in mind, right? As you're planning your career, I think it's okay if you don't think I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Just do what you love and try to do a good job with it, and it'll become evident as opportunities arise as you go.
So I actually had more of a sort of set career path. I always knew that I wanted to be in healthcare. And from that, I kind of knew at an early age that I wanted to be a doctor. I think just seeing my natural tendency to want to help people, and although that sounds cliche, that's obviously a big part of my career. So I spent a good portion of my time, volunteering at hospitals, even when I was younger, starting even at a very early age, and then kind of just worked through that, was involved in a lot of math and science stuff that led me eventually to a 7-year medical school program. And so I knew exactly kind of what I wanted to do, which was fortunate for me because I had this goal, and that's sort of where I found my love and my passion in this job. And then through that, obviously in medicine, there's a big variety of where you go. And I think that's where you can kind of hone in on what your personal interests are and what you find the most sort of rewarding for you personally. Along that career path, I also had a family path, and mine was a little bit later than most people. I have 2 young children, one of which is only 18 months and the other that's 5 now. So I'm while I'm older, having a family, I obviously was still able to fit this in along a career path, but still would have chosen medicine and a science career.
And I always knew I wanted to be in the technical field because I, through high school, was good in math and physics. But I thought I actually wanted to be an architect, and it wasn't until I got to college that I decided that I wanted to be an engineer. It's not surprising because I have a father who is an electrical engineer, and he was always taking things apart at home, and I was always fascinated by how things worked, how things are put together. And then through a scholarship, I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I needed to complete 4 years after college. I was an analyst, and for a year and a half, I was just looking at things in the world and trying to figure out how they, if there was anything that was interesting about them. And I was, I would say, dissatisfied because I was taking things apart that, hurt people. And I was just analyzing things. And I realized that I like to design, I like to create, I like to create new products. And so that's when through, a contact, through networking, through college friends, I found a job at Johnson & Johnson and decided that's where I learned to design hip implants and first got really into the biomedical engineer field. And I loved it. I loved it because you were creating products that helped people. And then, from there went on to more entrepreneurial endeavors. And my last, the company that I'm in now, it was really from my own personal needs. So I had 3 kids. My daughter was 9.5 pounds. I had 13 pounds of twins. I was looking for something to treat myself, and I didn't like anything I saw on the market. So we just decided to create a better solution for women. And that's how I got onto this path, and I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it sounds like there's a lot of different paths to get to your final career. Does anyone have anything else to add to that before we move on to the next question? All right, awesome. So the next question is a pretty positive one. I always like this question, but what is your favorite part of your career?
I really also enjoy being able to work on problems I believe are meaningful. I think about the patients who we work with, and I also really love being in a education environment. So I really enjoy working with students and working in a multidisciplinary team. It's just, it's really fun.
I'm going to echo what Aoi said about working with young people. That, as I was thinking about what is my favorite thing, it is absolutely working with young people. It's one of the reasons. So the United States Naval Academy, of course, is the military institution, but it is a primarily teaching institution. There's a research component of my job, but a big part of what we do is interacting with young people and mentoring young people as they're starting their professional lives is incredibly rewarding. And so for sure, that is my favorite part. I also like a big advantage of being an academic is that we get paid to learn, basically, right? Like we get paid to read journal articles and go to conferences and keep current in our field. And so if you're a curious person and you want to understand how things work and interact with people, it's just a fabulous combination of those aspects.
Sorry, just quickly, I echo that. Thank you, Melonie.
My job also involves a lot of, sort of working with people and individuals and working with patients in itself is rewarding. I think that's probably the favorite part of my job, is that I'm actually helping people, right? I mean, at the end of this, as a physician, that's sort of what your ultimate goal is. And you deal, especially in my field as a pulmonary critical care physician, I deal with the sickest of the sickest, the people that come in with some of the most complicated medical problems that sort of are either at this point where they need your most amount of help, and also need a lot of advice and at different parts of their life. And some of it involves death and dying, which is extremely difficult. But I have felt that in the last probably 5 years, I have realized the sort of reward and value you can provide to that. And helping people deal with this at a difficult time in their life is probably the biggest and most rewarding part of my career now. In addition to obviously working with others, we have a whole team approach to whether that's the nursing staff, that's the medical techs, it's just a very group philosophy. And I think that's where medicine has really sort of improved in the last couple of years. Even with the pandemic, you feel how people kind of come together, and that has been extremely rewarding as well.
I think there's a lot of common themes that I'm hearing. Definitely helping people is one of them. So I'm super happy that I started at a big company like Johnson & Johnson, because you really get to learn how to do things the right way. However, I was removed from the end user. There was a team of 10 people that would work on one hip implant. It would get past the marketing people, who get passed to the surgeons, who then would use it. And you never really heard from the customer. What I like now is I work on a small team. I work on so many different aspects of bringing this product to market, but I get to hear from the customers directly. And I get the emails that say how we change people's lives. I get emails that say, oh gosh, I went dancing and I hadn't danced in years, and I didn't know that I was able to do that again. Or there was one woman who hadn't left the house in a really long time because she had to always be so near the bathroom. And after using our product, she was able to go out. So seeing that end result is the best thing.
Awesome. So like Gloria just said, I think there are a lot of common themes in working with people, mentorship, and just the ability to help people. And I think that's a really valuable thing with the STEM field, is there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Does anyone else have any comment or any concluding remarks on this part? All right, great. Thank you. So the next question, there are favorite parts, but then on the flip side of that, there are least favorite or most challenging parts. So what would you say is your least favorite or most challenging part of your career?
So I guess the least favorite part of my career is that unfortunately, I don't really have time to work in the lab anymore. So I'm not actually doing the research hands-on any longer. Most of my time is spent writing grants and doing a lot of regulatory work. So I get to hear about it. I get to see the results, but I don't actually get to have the fun of doing the experiments myself any longer.
I think my response is related to that, also in an academic job. I think my least favorite or the hardest thing about the career field is that it just never stops. You're never done with your to-do list. And I'm sure that translates into other careers as well. But, I don't go home at the end of the day and it's just done. And so the hard thing is keeping myself constrained, right? I find myself, I work a lot of evenings, I work a lot of weekends, especially if there's a grant deadline or a journal article or even teaching related, deadlines that come up. So it's hard to remember to be disciplined about taking time for yourself and taking time for your family. I don't know if that's STEM specific. I'm sure there are lots of careers for which that's true, but that's definitely a challenge for me.
I would probably relate to that challenge. I work a lot of nights and weekends, and a lot of my time is not my own. And unfortunately, I can't always create some of those boundaries and guidelines because, unfortunately, when people need you, and medicine is one of those where there's not a set time where I'm done for the day. I mean, certainly there are careers in medicine where you can find that, and if that's really what you're looking for, you can obviously look for those particular areas to focus on or do a fellowship or training in. But my particular career is that it's not, there's never a time when I'm done. And often, whether that's my outpatient and that's the stuff that's sort of all the paperwork and the documentation is probably one of my most challenging parts of this job. And I think probably the second most challenging job is that I realize that I can't fix everyone, and there's this need, especially when you end up where you're a problem solver and you're a fixer and you want to, take on challenges, that sometimes those challenges don't have the solution that you want, or that it's not, it's not achievable. I think those are probably the two most challenging, kind of least favorite parts of my job.
So I think the least favorite part of my job has nothing to do with STEM. I still like all those aspects, but as an entrepreneur, I'm always selling, and it's not in my nature to be selling. I'm an introvert, but I'm selling to venture capitalists to raise money. I'm selling to customers that the product can really help them. I'm selling to the media, and so I don't like that aspect of it, but it's just something that you have to do.
Yeah, once again, I think there are a lot of common themes among the STEM fields, but I think with anything, there are unfortunately the advantages and disadvantages of each career choice. Does anyone have any final comments on that?
Oh, I did want to say one thing, because definitely a common thread is we're working all the time. We're working hard. We don't have a lot of time. One thing I do like about being an entrepreneur, though, is we set our hours, right? So I found an office that's 5 minutes from home. And if we need to leave at 3 p.m. to do all the sports shuttles and stuff like that, we do it. And then at 8 o'clock, or now the kids are older, but 9 o'clock, the kids are in bed and we go back to work. But, we as the boss get to set our hours and set how we want the environment to be in the office.
That's awesome. Thank you. So another question, which I think is appropriate for the panel of women that we have here, is, have you faced any challenges, particularly as a woman in your STEM field?
So I think there were definitely times during my education, particularly in the STEM field, where there were certainly fewer women in the room than there are men. So that, at least when I was in school. But I think that it sort of really relates to what Gloria was saying, in that now I really recognize that it is very difficult, particularly when you're in a startup company, for instance, or in business. That selling aspect is very difficult. And fundraising for women in particular, I think, is extremely challenging. And that we just, I think, can really improve upon this process. And this is an area that I think networking is going to be really important, and mentorship, and this area, for those who are pioneering in this space, it's still a frontier that needs to be expanded.
As I was thinking about this question, I think it's twofold for me, whether there's a difference being a woman in STEM, female in STEM, or being a mom in STEM. For me, those are two separate ways to approach the question. And I actually have done a little bit of work on women in STEM in academia. I had a research student several years ago that did a little bit of work in that. And there are certainly issues, but I don't know that I personally have experienced very much of that. I agree with Aoi. When I started my physical chemistry PhD at Berkeley, this was 25 years ago or so, there were only 5 women. And so it was very lonely, very isolating. And it made that, I think that's a later question, it made that part of my life pretty challenging. Grad school is not my favorite part of life. But other than that, I haven't really noticed as much being a woman until I became a mom. And then I felt like it was enormously different, because although things are changing and things are getting better, there's a lot of primary parenting that goes on with women, and it depends on the family, it depends on the situation, but that's been definitely a challenge for me. I think having good mentors is helpful. So finding people that can give you really good advice, someone that's got a life similar to what you might want to model, is helpful. And then I think setting boundaries and being transparent. So one thing I do, because I have women in my classroom and they're looking at us as role models, I'm pretty transparent. You know, if I have to leave early, I think Gloria, you said this, you know, if I have to leave early to go, you know, pick up one of my children, or someone's got an event, or I'll say so, right? Because I want them to see that there's this life outside of what I'm doing. And I think especially young people, Maya, you can, you know better than us, but I think young people are looking for that. They're looking for, what do I want my life to look like that is balanced, and so that's something that I try to focus on, knowing that I'm working with young people, is just trying to be very transparent in choices I make, even if they're difficult.
I think there have been a number of challenges as a women physician. I think, though, as the number of women in medical careers has gone up, and as you know, medical schools now have a higher balance, and in fact, more women in medicine that are graduating yearly, that hopefully this trend will change. But I do think that it is difficult as a woman in my profession to sort of gain respect, not only from their peers, but also patients. The traditional model was always, you know, a male who comes into the room. And I remember distinctly as a medical student, and even later when I became an attending, and they would still look at the male medical student as the person who they thought was their physician. So there are times where I feel that the respect, you know, from your patients and trying to prove to them, and also to your peers and your colleagues, is that you're more so than I think the males, is that you're trying to prove yourself and say, hey, listen, I'm as equal as you, and I can do as good of a job as you. And in a field like mine, pulmonary critical care, there's actually not a lot of women, except more recently, that have sort of, you know, gone towards that. And when, you know, most of my colleagues, I work in a group of almost 14 individuals, and there is only one other individual that's a woman in that group. So there are challenges, definitely. And I would agree with you that I look at this as, one, as women in STEM, and the second also being a woman mom, you know, in STEM, because I think that's where things get a little bit more challenging when you're trying to decide your schedule, or you're looking for that extra time to be able to take care of your kids or go to pick up and drop off. I don't really have a lot of that flexibility because I work in a very demanding group. And it's not that those things can't exist. You just have to seek out those opportunities, and those opportunities are more difficult to find in this particular profession. And I'm hoping, though, as time changes, that gets to be something that's not frowned upon when you say, hey, listen, I need to create a schedule that tailors to my family needs as well as my career needs, that it's not something that's looked at as, you know, lower, or that you're not an equal to them, but it is a challenge. And I had to try to go to part-time, and even as a part-time physician, I work a full-time, you know, more than a full-time schedule. And I think those are really the challenging parts as being a woman in my particular profession. And never mind going through maternity and being able to take time off and do all the other things that you would expect in other careers that maybe are also challenges, but also are, maybe you can kind of tailor a schedule where you don't have patients depending on you, or you don't have a schedule that depends on, you know, where you are at all times. Because like I said, I don't really create a schedule. The schedule is something that's based on what's going on at that time.
So I would say early in my career, I started my first company when I was in my late 20s. I would have to prove myself to just be heard. And I remember that in my, venture capital pitches, I would always start with my credentials first. Like I went to these colleges just so that they don't just, dismiss me right from the beginning. And now that we have a product for women, and it's funny to hear some of the comments that, oh, women's health, that's niche. Like, how can half the population be niche? But I would go into a venture capital meeting, or I remember one angel group meeting, 50 men in the audience, and I would say 1 out of 3 women has this problem. And still after that pitch, they would say, I've never heard of this. Is this really a problem? So maybe that's not really a issue in STEM, but just an issue with women's health, or, kind of proving myself. One thing that kind of helped me along the way was there gets to a point, and we talked about being a mom, in your career where you make a choice. Do I really want to go down this career path, or do I want to focus a little bit more on being a mom? And I know that a lot of my female friends have stepped out of the workforce to be a mom full time, and that's fantastic. But I remember reading a Harvard Business School research article where they said the happiest women were those who were both, those who were moms, but also had a career, and they were the happiest women. And that kind of gave me some peace of, okay, I can do this, and I'm not going to be guilty about having a career as well. So I really like that.
Thank you for those very thorough answers. I think that touches on a lot of important things with the distinction of not only being a woman in STEM, but also being a mom in STEM. And I also think something that's important to note is that things are certainly changing, as some of you touched upon, and there are ways to, I guess, find mentorship or find communities within these fields that can make that experience a lot easier. And being a woman in STEM can be something that is really rewarding. So despite those challenges, I definitely think that's something that we're looking forward to in the future and even right now. Okay, awesome. So,
and Maya, do you mind if I just pitch in?
Just
to echo on what you were saying, I agree. Things are changing. What's really exciting is, I've been to, events like this, or, I've been to Women in STEM conferences. I've been, part of conversations. People are talking about it, including the mom. There's talk of family leave and maternity leave and paternity leave. And, I think as a society, we're trying to figure it out. And so I think it's really exciting, because I think it's going to lead to some policy changes and, maybe some things that'll make things easier in the future.
Absolutely. So actually, our next question also kind of touches on some of the things that were briefly mentioned in this question and before, but the next question is, and I'm changing up the order a little bit from what I sent you, but what things do you like to do in your free time, and how do you balance that with your career?
So what do we like to do? So our weekends are typically spent watching the kids participate in their activities. My son plays football in college, and the girls play high school tennis. So we see a lot of games and watch a lot of matches. I enjoy watching my daughter also play in the high school band.
I have kind of an idealistic answer. I love to travel. This has been a hard time because there hasn't been a lot of travel, but I love to travel, love to spend time with family and friends. Like I was saying, definitely you shift in what your focus is. I am a musician. I still play cello some. And so I do try to play when I can. I've been able to play almost, I've had periods of time where I haven't been able to play, but that was something I pursued as a student that I still find very satisfying. And so finding an opportunity to do that, I enjoy. And I think, Maya, you had asked about balancing that, right, with the career, which I think we did talk about in the last question a little bit. And I'm just going to say again what I said about being transparent. I think there was a time, and maybe some people still are, reluctant to say what they're doing, right? If you have to do something because of family, I think there's a tendency to maybe try to hide that or try to make sure that you look like you're serious about your career. And for better or worse, I've taken the approach of I just tell people, right, this is going on. I'm going to do this for my kids. And my hope is that will just make the conversation easier to have. And that is, people just realize we have lives and we do work and then we do things outside. One point I was going to make with the previous question that I forgot to make is, in academia especially, and I think this applies to, I think, everyone on this panel, but when you're in a career field where there are some people that work all the time, right? I mean, there are people that work the kinds of hours that maybe, that I certainly can't at times. And so what I try to do is make a point of being excellent at the things that you do, right? I mean, I think we all try to do that, but I think if you have a reputation for excellence, so when you're on, make sure you're on, right? And do your very best and produce very high quality work. And then when you say, you know what, I need to take this time off, or I need to do this, I need this change in schedule, or whatever your request may be. For example, I've requested teaching schedules to accommodate my kids' schedules. So I've done that. But if you have a reputation for excellence, I think then people are willing to make those accommodations because they don't perceive you as just trying to get out of something. They perceive that you're trying to figure out a balance, and they can still, have you produce for that organization in the way that they hope you will.
I think finding that balance is really key, in echoing what you were saying, and trying to find that schedule that works for you to try to be able to still preserve the things that you love to do in your free time, as well as try to be an excellent performer, at work and in your career, and show that you're serious about it, and that takes time, and I think takes effort to do, to be efficient with your time and say, listen, I want this free time to myself. This is the time that I'm going to either read my favorite book, which is something I love to do, or spend time with my children and sort of protect that time, and allow the time that I'm focusing on my career kind of be the time that I'm at my job and I'm taking care of my paperwork and my notes and my charting. And then the time that I'm home doing the things that I like I said, whether that's reading, watching a show on Netflix, or spending time with my children, which is probably the three biggest things that I love, that I try to still give myself that time to sort of recharge so that I'm 100% at the other part of my life, my career. It is sometimes harder because you get pulled in different directions, or things that need to get taken care of urgently, or if you're in surge mode for COVID, then I have to sacrifice a little bit more. But I do try to still preserve my free time so that I can have that kind of break and do the things, that kind of give me that peace of mind.
So I'm very aware of how short our time is with our kids. I have a senior in high school, and I'm very aware that she's leaving in 6 months. So, do I read novels anymore? No, because I'm just gonna, like everyone says, I'm just gonna, my weekends are watching kids' sports, spending time with them. If she wants to go shopping, I'll go shopping with her. And I realize that our life is in seasons, and I will get that season back where I will have more time for myself, and that's fine, and I'll come a little later. The one thing that I really do try to make sure that I make time for myself is exercising. And so recently we just moved houses where there's running trails behind our house, and I will take that time for myself. Maybe it's just 30 minutes before dinner. And that allows me to relax after a day, as well as just enjoy the nature and just get some exercise in at the same time.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of different ways of balancing work and life, and doing that can vary from person to person. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
So I apologize. I forgot to answer a little bit of this question. I feel very blessed. I do have in-laws who live close to us, and so they have really helped our family with achieving some of the balance. Having family close by is just, impossible to imagine our lives, how much they've added to our lives. I also have great helpers, so I've sought out help and find ways to outsource meals often too. That's made a huge difference in our lives, just so that you have a little more time with family. That's my advice, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah. So just another way of looking at it and maintaining that work-life balance. All right. So going back to the question before, what education did you need for your career, and what was your educational experience like?
So my pathway was, I was a mechanical engineering major at MIT, and then I went to graduate school in biological engineering, where I started off building genetic instruments and found myself becoming more and more interested in the genetics and the biology itself. I was also in an incredibly creative environment in Boston. So being immersed in kind of this startup atmosphere, I had exposure to a number of really creative and exciting opportunities. And so I was just very excited to participate in those. But then when my husband needed to further his clinical training in Philadelphia, I ended up going back into academia. And we were then recruited to the University of Louisville, where I took my first faculty position in biomedical engineering. And then when my husband was recruited to Wisconsin, I followed him 6 months later and took a faculty position at the Medical College of Wisconsin.
So like Ali was talking about, for an academic career field, you do need a PhD. So depending on the background of the people possibly watching this later, if you do want to pursue an academic career with any kind of a research component, you do need a PhD. So my bachelor's degree, I'm not sure I mentioned this earlier, was actually in mathematics, but I liked chemistry a lot as I was going along. And so I did do my PhD in chemistry. And then it was a long time before I took a civilian tenure track academic job. I'm one of those, this is in fact my promotion and tenure review year, even though I'm more senior in age. I won't tell you exactly how old I am, but I took quite a curvy road to get here, which is why I said I didn't really have a set career path. But having that PhD has really been critical to everything I've wanted to do. So I've been able to do research for the military. I've been able to do research for the National Science Foundation, as I worked on several grants funded by the National Science Foundation, and then of course in academia. But a PhD is a pretty unique, it's not meant for everybody. And I don't know if Ali would have a comment on this, but it's really a research-based degree. So especially if you're starting out, it's not necessarily the path. If you want to work in STEM, not everybody gets PhD. So bachelor's degree, absolutely essential, possibly a master's degree. I know Gloria has a different background she might talk about, but that PhD really is a research-focused degree that was essential to what I'm doing and to what Ali's doing, but is certainly not necessary for a lot of STEM degrees that are out there, or STEM jobs that are out there.
So obviously medicine requires a number of years of training. I did a 7-year program, which I kind of alluded to. I did 3 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school. And then I went on to do, that's where you sort of decide after that, what do you want to do after medical school? And I chose to do internal medicine. I did 3 years of internal medicine back up in Massachusetts, where I'd done my training in New York. And then in Massachusetts, I went on after I did 3 years of residency in internal medicine. I did a chief medicine residency for another year, and then another 3 years of pulmonary critical care fellowship, and then another year of sleep medicine to finally end up graduating and starting my first job. So it is a long track. You learn along the way, which as a learner and somebody who wants to keep along that path, you spend a number of years in training, which eventually prepares you for your what your career is. I think as part, what's unique about the second half of your learning and your training is that you're actually also practicing what you're doing. So sometimes it doesn't feel like just learning and practicing, you're actually, starting your career at that point. And I try to tell people, even though it seems like a long process, you may not be getting paid all that much and you're still learning, but you're actually already partially practicing.
I feel like the least educated person here. But so I got my bachelor's at MIT, and then I went to Stanford for my master's. My bachelor's was in mechanical engineering. My master's was in electromechanical engineering. And then when we started our first company, I thought I was going to be the engineer in the company, and they wanted me to run it. And so I went to get my MBA in entrepreneurship at Batson College. And now that I'm in marketing, I would say that I'm still learning all the time, because marketing is such a new field for me. The nice thing about digital marketing is that it is so new that it's changing all the time, that there's really no expert out there. So you're just constantly trying to learn from everyone you can about digital marketing and what's out there. And I do think a lot of healthcare is moving more towards direct to consumer, and quite a lot of devices and at-home treatments, especially COVID, sped a lot of things up with that. But that's kind of my path till now.
Great, thank you. So does anyone have anything to add to kind of conclude that? I guess one of the biggest takeaways with this is that there's a lot of different educational paths you can take if you're interested in STEM, and that may be dependent on what's right for you or what's right for the career that you're going into. All right, great. So the next question is also.
And Maya, sorry, I think your point is a really good one. And it kind of relates to my point about if you don't know exactly your path, not to worry about it. I think for any of our careers, that bachelor's degree wasn't exactly critical to what we ended up doing, right? It was related, and certainly there was coursework that was important, but my undergraduate degree is in math, and now I'm a chemistry professor. And so having some sort of STEM background, I would say, is what is key. And one point I will make, because I teach at an institution, we are mandated by law to have 65% of our graduates in STEM degrees, but those people that choose non-STEM degrees, it can be tough to get back on the STEM track if you step off, I guess. And so if you're really interested in a STEM degree, there are many, many options, but do keep in mind that the more STEM background you have, the better, whether it's an actual degree or a minor or a concentration, just that it's hard to get back into STEM if you venture too far away.
Great, thank you. I think that was an important point to add.
Sorry, I just wanted to echo that, what Melonie just said. Also, I think STEM is just terrific preparation for being able to take the opportunities that present themselves to you and to help you make really excellent and informed choices.
Great, thank you. So moving on to the next question, what is your proudest accomplishment so far?
So for me, I think it's really seeing my students, trainees succeed, watching their progress in the lab, or seeing them make discoveries. That's really what makes me most proud.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said when I was thinking about it. At first you think, wow, what is the tangible, accomplishment? But all that kept coming back to me was so I called them mentorship wins as I was kind of thinking about it. People that I've mentored that then you hear back from. So, you'll get notes or emails, and I keep all of them. So if you hit a low point in your career, you can pull them out. And Gloria's already talked about some of those from customers, right? Those are the things that keep you going. And just as one example, I I did teach at the Naval Academy when I was in the military 20 years ago. And I had a student who at the time took Gen Chem with me, and she got a D both semesters. And just one of many students that I'd had. So 10 years later, her husband came to visit me in my office, and she was commanding a ship. And he came and said, she survived plebe year because of, you and plebe chemistry. And it was just one of those, so you just don't know. And things like that are far more rewarding than, I don't know, getting a grant or getting a paper published, or, those, I don't know, more concrete tangibles. It really is the personal wins that make the career rewarding for me as well.
Yeah, I can't say that I have one proudest accomplishment. I think that's obviously more difficult as a tangible or even intangible thing, especially in my career. I'd say that the biggest, I do have residents and fellows that, we've mentored along the way. And it's always nice when I was a chief resident to kind of see what they had gone on to accomplish, or they remember the morning reports I used to give. But the other accomplishment, obviously, is just the patients that get better, and sometimes we get these cards, which is always nice to receive after you worked hard, because you don't really know, and we do our best, right? And every now and then you get a card or something from a patient, and they're just so grateful. And I think that to me is, yes, I feel like, wow, I did maybe accomplish something. Maybe the outcome wasn't exactly what everybody wanted, but they were appreciative of the way that it got handled, or the way that you provided care, or what you tried to do. So those are, I think, the things that give me a sense of, accomplishment. Not that I always seek those out. It's always hard to sort of say that this is the tangible or intangible, but I think that, hopefully those will continue along your career path, or in any fields for that matter. But there's no one pinpoint that I would say.
I mentioned a little bit earlier about the customer feedback, but I also think some of my proudest moments are as a mom, when I hear my kids describing what I do, and I can see that they're proud of me. Then I'm like, okay, all those, they know that I work hard and that I miss some of their meets, but it's okay, because they see what I'm doing, how I'm helping people, and it encourages them. And so I have a daughter who started her own company, and she's doing well. And, I'm just happy to inspire her, I guess.
And I think it's really interesting that all the things that you guys were able to talk about were these intangible things. And I think that really emphasizes how important the community is in STEM and the people around you. And that's a lot of times what makes a career in this field so valuable, at least from what it seems like.
Maya, I wanted to add one thing. I would say that also one of my biggest, proudest accomplishments is still maintaining my career and having my family, kind of echoing to what Gloria was saying, that being able to try to manage and have both has something that I also feel is an accomplishment. And my daughter looking up to me and saying, listen, I want to be, a Dr. Mom chef, and the fact that I would agree with Gloria that is also definitely an accomplishment.
That's great. Thank you. All right. So for our second to last question, describe your work environment, including the people you work with and your team.
So I work in a multidisciplinary environment. We work with surgeons, cardiologists, statisticians, data scientists, molecular biologists, stem cell scientists, and bioengineers. My lab has varied in size throughout the years. I currently have a lab manager, a senior scientist, clinical research manager, and students. So we're about 6 right now. And I have 2 really lovely, really very bright MD, PhD students who are women.
When I was thinking about this question, there are kind of 2 things that I wanted to highlight that make me love where I work. And I've had this, because I've had this strange path, ending up where I am was a very intentional move. It wasn't like this job I got accidentally and hope I like it. I chose to be here. And the two things that I love, one is it's very collaborative. And I think that's important in STEM, especially, I don't know, if you're at the point of your professional trajectory where it's still competitive, right? Where you're maybe trying to get into med school or, get into a certain school or, but working in STEM, at least in my experience, is not competitive. I don't know, maybe Gloria will have something different to say, I'm not sure, but it's very collaborative and people are very willing to share and help you be better. And that's something that I really love about my job. And the second is, I think it's partly related to being at an academic institution, but also to being part of the military still, is to be part of something with a kind of a strong sense of purpose. I love being part of an organization. It just really focused on, kind of this big service aspect. And I think there are aspects in all of our careers as we've talked about them today. But those two things I really find valuable, kind of being part of a larger purpose and then being part of a very collaborative atmosphere.
So I work in a hospital-based system or hospital-employed system out here in South Jersey for Virtua Health. And in my group, there's, like I said, about 14 individuals that are physicians. Obviously, depending on where I'm staffed, it's both a hospital-based practice as well as an outpatient office-based / clinic practice. And both of those areas have a group of or a team of individuals, whether that be the nurses in the hospital, and all the lab techs and the whole hospital environment. And in the office, we have medical assistants, we have nurses, in addition to just the physicians. So there is a, once again, kind of a multidisciplinary group team collaborative effort that allows us to do what we need to do in terms of delivery of healthcare. But both of those involve team approaches as well.
So I'm in a very tiny team. There are 4 of us in the office, and then I have a whole slew of consultants and contractors. What's probably interesting is that I co-founded this company with my husband. We met a long time ago at Johnson & Johnson, both biomedical engineering. And then we separated and did our own things, and now we've come back together. What I think is interesting is, as I've seen him in this new role, in this new light, working, all day with him, I've appreciated new things about him that I didn't know before, where I see him interact with people, and he has skills that I don't have. It's just a newfound appreciation for my husband.
And it is important to note, I think, that all of you recounted having some form of a team or collaborative effort. So a lot of times science can be interdisciplinary and you have that community around you. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add about that?
I would like to echo what Gloria said too. So I also work with my husband, and so I think that has brought us together. It's not something that has been at all a negative for our careers.
Awesome. I think that's a really unique and interesting way of balancing both work life and kind of having those things intertwine. All right, and for our final question, this is a pretty open-ended one, but do you have any concluding advice for us, whether that's education, career, or life in general?
So my PhD advisor told me that I should find a problem that I was inspired to work on. And I think that was very wise. You'll spend a lot of time working on a problem. So that's been just very helpful and has been just something that's kept me through these many years. I think for the life in general, I think that surround yourself with people who inspire you, friends, associates. I had great roommates in college and in graduate school. I was blessed to be surrounded by amazing women and friends in college and in graduate school. College was a very treasured and incredible time I appreciated it then, but I appreciate it even more now. I think that things don't always work out exactly as planned, but challenges are opportunities, and setbacks happen, but you shouldn't become overwhelmed, and don't be afraid to tackle the big challenges. I think I rarely have felt ready to tackle some of the big decisions that we made, but I think that STEM does prepare you to make these decisions.
I think my big closing advice, if I were, starting all over, or to people who may be starting, is to think about what path will be personally fulfilling to you. I think sometimes it's tempting to do what others expect of you, or maybe what you expect of yourself if you have a certain skill set, or there are certain expectations. But now several years away from college, finding that path that's just personally fulfilling is really what's important. So try to figure out what it is that would make you happy, and to pursue that, and don't make choices based on other people. I think, again, because I work with young people, sometimes you'll see that people may be choosing a major or an institution or a career because they think that's what's expected of them, and it's hard to counsel with those people. So just think about what would make you happy and personally fulfilled, and then just follow that path. And again, which I've said a couple of times, don't worry if you don't know what that is. Just do the next thing, and then worry about the next thing when that time comes. That would be my advice.
I think all the advice given so far I would completely agree with. I think the only other things that I would kind of add to that is sort of find people that are good mentors or great mentors for you, because they're the ones that are going to inspire you or lead you, or say, hey, listen, you may want to try this, and kind of support you when you feel like, I'm not sure what I want to do or what path I want to go along, because they really can give you good guidance. And as you can see, we all have different places where we came from, some direct paths, some indirect paths that really allowed us to get to where we wanted to be. The other thing I'd say, be passionate, like what you do, like you said, love what you do, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. And whether, as you saw, we all went through years of training to get there. So you want to be sure that, and if you find out that it's something that you thought you liked to do, you can always change, and even in any field, even in medicine, for example, I became a pulmonary critical care physician, but I could have changed at that path, or decided after medical school that I wanted to do something different. And you have to be confident in who you are, that you are always smarter than you think, you work harder than you think, and realize that it's there within you. We sometimes may get bogged down by things like failures and other people saying, oh, you could have done this, or, and we're just not as confident in what we've accomplished or what we're capable of doing, and know that you are. There's always going to be, people that are there to support you, and make sure that those are the people that you have in your life.
I agree with all of the above. One thing that I would like to add, just based on my own experience, is it's, you go through education and all these technical things. I think you always want to be a student on some of the softer skills as well. So public speaking is important, being confident when you speak, how you present yourself, learning charisma. I mean, I know that at certain ages, or when you're going through college, you don't think about any of that stuff, but it is important. It's important in business and in life. So that's it.
That's great. Thank you. And I'll just ask really quickly, does anyone have anything to add to something someone else might have said? Okay, awesome. And with that, thank you so much for your guidance, both to this question and your answers to all the other questions as well. I know this has been really interesting for me to listen to, and I know it'll help a lot of other students as well. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maya.
Maya.